Hi, let's get right into making these adorable abstract watercolor gift tags. I'm using my holiday paper as inspiration, shown here, for my color palette, but this could really be for any occasion. So I've selected the colors that I see in my paper, but I'm just making random marks. I've gotten my paper sprayed with a little bit of water so that I'll get some surprise runs. That's sort of the fun of this exercise. And so I'm just splattering and adding color as my base. Because this is for individual tags, you really don't have to worry about your overall composition. What you want to do here is just look for interesting marks throughout. So you can see here I'm creating a little bit of dry brushing, and then when I add in another color, I can get some nice blends. It's really up to you what type of marks you want. I'm seeing some inspiration from the ornaments on the tree, which are round. And again, this is just my inspiration. We're not married to any of the patterns. In fact, last year when I made my tags, I used this same paper. I created more literal interpretation with little gifts and the owls, the trees, and they were fun as well. But this year I wanted to do something a little different. So I'm excited to see how they're going to pair up nicely with the paper. So adding some of the green, and this green has a lot of granulation, so I'm very excited about the interesting blends that I'm getting as I add the water to it. You know, it kind of explodes. And then when you're doing this, if you see something you like, just do more of it. So I did like the combination of the transparent red oxide with the pyrrole scarlet. So I'm trying to capitalize on that and make more of it mix in together because I think that's such a beautiful blend. Don't forget to leave some areas of your paper unpainted unless you want everything solid, but I do think it makes a nice rhythm when you cut the tags to have that contrast of the paper showing through. Speaking of paper, I felt like I was getting a little bit heavy-handed, so I wanted to add the Naples yellow, and I'll add a little buff titanium just to keep a little more neutral, or not neutral, but softer tones. They weren't all Christmassy red and green. The other nice thing about this Naples yellow is it has a bit of opacity to it, so I can go on top of the colors that are already darker underneath, and we still get a little exposure to it. Same thing for the white gouache here. White gouache, even though it's very diluted on top of wet pigments, makes really interesting blends. It kind of pushes the pigments out, so I like that splattering effect. Some of it will dissipate and you won't see too much, but again, it's just creating really nice, soft, interesting blends. You can kind of see throughout the variety of the values, which, even though this isn't a real composition, is still important to make things interesting, to have dark darks and light lights. So I'm trying to keep a nice balance of that. And then I thought, oh, let's pick up a little bit of the shapes of the trees. I could kind of see a tree in there. So I'm filling in some of these areas with a little more of a literal interpretation. And while I cut the tags, you'll never notice that. It's still kind of fun as you're creating to have that as inspiration. So adding those, super dark with the deep sap green makes a really pretty blend, and it's doing this really wonderful thing of charging into the other colors. So I love this super dark next to the light, and just have fun. This, there is no right and wrong. As you cut, you'll see you create really interesting little mini layouts. So concentrate as you're doing this on just making unusual surprise marks, things that create excitement and movement. And so I can see this is doing a lot of that, which is pretty exciting. It's almost like a spider web. So I like this so much, I'm going to do the same with some red. So while my paper's still wet, I can still get some nice charges in with just, it's the same Pyro Scarlet, it's just going in much richer to create that variety of value. And you can see I'm moving around my paper, knowing that these tags are going to be smaller. And by lifting my block up and moving it around, you can see how the wet areas kind of go into other areas and create even more unexpected blends. And while you don't have to go to the very edges, I didn't want to have all white here, so I'm just trying to expand that area out a bit. And I'm just using a single brush here, but you could change your brush size. The Rosemary and Company brush I have is a nice shape because I can use the point as well as it carries a lot of water and pigment. So I was feeling a little bit of medium tone, so I wanted just to add some of those darkers. And if you're painting along, please don't try to do exactly what I'm doing. This is really just inspiration to show you whatever kind of marks you make will make really beautiful tags. And that's kind of the fun. Just, enjoy, get in the holiday spirit or whatever the occasion is, and have fun watching the beautiful watercolors blend into each other. You might decide to paint one that's much more graphic, and that's okay too. It's just whatever you want to get out of it, whatever mood. I wanted mine to have a lot of movement and expression, and that is the times that I have the most fun. So I don't want to overdo my splatters. I'm going to be adding some different mark making shortly. And here you can see I'm just rolling my brush and now using the tip to take advantage of some of that white space and add yet another style of a mark. And I'm enjoying as I'm doing this, I can see some of the wet paint is blending in nicely with the brush so you can see it's not just a single color, it's carrying on to the adjacent areas. Here I'm adding lavender, which really wasn't literally in my inspiration, but there were some cool tones, more of a gray. But I wanted to keep it bright and fresh. And I love the contrast of the warm palette I have with the lavender. And lavender is an opaque color, so I can go on top without having to be too concerned with the transparency. I know I can get some coverage if I want to go heavier. So I don't want this to take over, I just want it a little bit. I had kind of lost my little ornament red dots, so I was going over with some of them. And, you know, no one is going to know those were ornaments. That's really not the point. It just was something for me to use as my inspiration to kind of bounce off of. If your paper or inspiration has some gold, I know a lot of holiday papers do, that would be a beautiful thing to add metallic colors to this that would just catch the light. Mine was a little more natural, so I didn't go down that route, but I can see that would make beautiful holiday tags. And you might look at this and go, this is a crazy composition. What are you thinking? But you'll see when I cut them how interesting it is. Here I'm using my palette knife to drag some of those colors across each other. The palette knife makes these very delicate, thin marks, which again contrast nicely with some of the big blobby shapes. You can also scrape into your paper and reveal some of the paper below by actually kind of cutting through the paper. Obviously, not all the way, but that is a fun, kind of creates a highlight area within the color. Here I'm going to try my stencil, but this first attempt, my paper below is still a little too damp. So what's happening is as I rub it, it kind of is bleeding into the areas below. Also, when you're using a stencil, make sure to have a paper towel nearby because you want to dab it up. And here I did not, so it expanded. And then I just kind of removed some of the pigment. But, you know, I'm stubborn, so I'm going to try it again in a few more places before I think, nope, just be patient and wait it out. But as you can see, hard-headed. I do it several times just to see what I can get, and I'm not getting the effect. So I'll come back to that later. You want your paper to be just barely damp to do the stencil. In fact, it could be completely dry for great effect. So now I've let the paper dry a little more, and I'm going to add some very fine lines that are more calligraphy looking with the dark, just again to put kind of a layer on top for more movement and interest. So you want to hold your brush at the very end. You can see I'm almost to the tip of it, far away from the actual brush, and then that allows you to make these kind of loose marks. You also want to make sure that that rigger is loaded up with pigment and is very damp. Otherwise, you get just a lot of this dry brushing, which I don't mind either, but if you want these dark, almost pen-like marks, you want to make sure there's a lot of paint. on that brush, it does not carry a lot of water or pigment, and that's the idea. So here I'm just checking for dampness, and I know it's dry enough now that I can go in with a toothbrush and just clean water and remove some of that pigment below. And so now you can see it's retaining the circular shape, which is what I was looking for. So I'm trying to pick areas that have a little bit of pigment on them. They don't all have to be super dark, but that's where it shows up the best because you're actually removing it. And so you can see you get a nice circle shape, which is what I was going for. And these can feel a little bit like light reflections or more ornaments. Again, this is an abstract expression exercise, so we're not looking for literal subjects, but it is nice to have that to inspire us. And the stencil does give yet another mark, so not everything's just splatter and blends. So I'm moving around the paper because I know when I cut, I want to have some continuity, even though each gift is unique and it really doesn't matter. They don't have to look anything alike. I do like that I'll have a set. If you were planning to package them up and sell them, you would want that as well. People would be looking for a theme. Feel like I could use some brushier marks. So I'm going in with my friend white gouache and I'm making very deliberate kind of slash marks with my angle shader. And that's going to give us a very, very painterly feel. And I have mostly just straight gouache here so that it's retaining its value. You could have just left some of the paper showing through, but I guess I got a little carried away. So I wanted to have a few more lights in here. And again, I think this streaky sort of a mark adds a lot of movement. You can also use it to kind of repair, cover up any areas you don't like that are below, or don't use gouache at all. It's really your piece and it's up to you. You know, white splatter gouache on dry paint below would be really nice to feel like snow. Okay, so now that we've painted and we're dried, I have to figure out what kind of dimensions I want. So I'm trying to maximize the use of my painted area. And around the edges, it's kind of just a waste. It's just, not a waste, but kind of a sacrifice. I'm just going to cut off that area so that I know how to get the most out of what's left and painted. I don't mind a little bit of the white edge showing through, but I really want the tags to be painted, not just white. So here I'm cutting off the scrap area. And take your time with your X-Acto. The watercolor paper is thick, so you need to go through several times before it cuts, so because you definitely want clean edges, no rips. So I'm doing the same on both sides here. And what will remain will be my kind of active area, which I can then divide up into sizes that make sense so that I get the most out of what I've painted, and I'm not just throwing away areas. That'll make more sense as you see when I cut. And if you painted and went all the way to the edge, you could skip this step altogether. So I'm just splitting it in the middle so that I can see my measurements below and I don't have to draw lines in order to cut. And that'll give me two more manageable pieces to work with. So now I can see, I can line up and go, I want 2 inches, and I can use my ruler for the hash marks on both ends and just cut straight through. So I've got a 2-inch wide tag. So I'll just cut that one way, one direction throughout this whole scrap, and then, or not scrap, sheet, and then I'll do the same for the other sheet. And there is no right or wrong dimension for a gift tag. I wanted these to have a little bit of drama on the package, so I'm making them fairly large. If you wanted them smaller, you could go as small as you want. I think 2 inches is a nice size. You can also decide, do you want them square? Do you want them rectangular? How large do you want? I'm going to do a variety to, again, maximize the paper I've painted, which I'll show you in a moment. And so you can see I don't have much throwaway here. Once I trim off this little area, I've only removed about a 1/2 inch. So here's the first side of the sheet, what we have to work with. And it's so interesting just to see what's left. And then I'll do the same for the other half. It's good practice to use a metal ruler. Your X-Acto is not going to cut into it, and to always have the ruler cover your art. That way, if your hand slips, you're not slicing through your art. Now, in this case, we have art on both sides, so you just need to be deliberate and make shallow cuts and go through. You can see I'm doing at least 3 cuts in order to get all the way through the paper. This technique, though, will protect your hands as well so that you're not accidentally slicing your hand. So take your time during this. This is what was left over. It just happened to be 2 inches, kind of based on my earlier calculation. So I'm going to keep that one as is. So here are the strips I ended up with. And now I'll cut the other dimension. And based on what I have left, I'm going to get 2 different sizes because I'm going to do both a 3-inch, and instead of wasting the very bottom, I'll go ahead and leave it at 4 because some of the larger packages can handle a larger tag, and that way I'm getting the most use out of my paper. So you can see I'm left with that 4 inches. So I think, yeah, let's just go with that. So here are my two sizes. I've got the smaller rectangular and the larger. So I'll continue with that on the rest of the tags. And you can look at your strip and say, which do you like better? Which which things do you want to have on the larger tag versus the smaller? Decide where you want to cut. My favorite tag ends up being this one at the right. And so I wanted that to be a nice, big, dramatic one. I would not overthink this step. They're all going to be unique in their own, and there's really no right or wrong answer. So don't dwell too much on your decision of where to cut. The idea is that it's abstract and it's fun. So this stage, it doesn't take too long really to cut through them, and I actually ended up with a lot more tags than I expected. I used a pretty large sheet of paper. I'll put the information in the description. But if you didn't want as many tags, just use a 9 by 12 sheet or even smaller. That's the nice thing about making things from scratch is you get to decide what's custom to you. I'm laughing to myself because as I'm cutting these, I'm admiring the little mini compositions that have been created. So you can see it really doesn't matter what your full sheet look like because it's more important to have interesting color combinations and blends and marks that are adjacent to each other because that's what you end up seeing for the final tag. And this cutting mat is really convenient. Obviously, if you have a paper cutter, that's even better, but I don't have one, so I just do it kind of old school. I was kind of looking at this one, debating whether I wanted to use it, but I'm really glad I did it. It's made some really interesting, not interesting, it's made a variety of tags by having more of the white paper show through. Again, if you're thinking of it as a set, that could be important. And this one had this last big tag had a weird cut. So I'll just trim off and decide I'm just going to go with a 3-inch for this last one. That way I don't get that non-square angle there at the end. For the next step, you need a hole punch. And I don't have any corner punches, but that would be really fun too. They make ways that you can cut off the corners to make them round. I'm just showing you here kind of the variety of what we got, how different some of them look from each other, and some of my favorite areas in mark making. Overall, I think they all came out really interesting and nice. I was really happy with the whole effort. Okay, so for the hole punch, this is just a standard hole punch. I've had it for years, but I'm not measuring at all. I'm just making sure I go deep enough into it around the center so that I'm not cutting off the edge or cutting through. And here I had some raffia, so I tied it at the end and I will feed the loop through and then insert the tied end back on. And be careful when you're tightening it here not to pull too hard. The raffia was really stiff, so I'm having to kind of work a little bit more than I thought I would, but I'm just getting it kind of in the right position so that it's close to the hole. And I'll show you this step again a little farther. I was reusing the end of the raffia I had, and so I'll do another cord. So I'll give you kind of a variety of options, but you could use ribbon, you could use string, really anything that feels appropriate and matches. Again, if you wanted to use metallic, that would be a great metallic cord. That would be beautiful on a tag. So you just need to decide which end is up. Whatever looks right to you is the right answer. And, if you're doing this just for you, you can punch all the holes at one time. I was trying to demonstrate as I go, so I'm kind of punching and putting the cord through. So just do what makes sense. It might be more efficient just to punch all the holes and then go through and prep all your string and then go from there. So here's the cord that I have. Cord, I guess it's more of a string. It does have a little bit of a metallic gold running through it. So you cut it, mine's about 16 inches, and then I fold it in half, tie a knot, and then you thread the loop through your hole and then insert the tied end through it, and then you tighten up. So I'll show you again. You just loop it, tie it, and then feed the looped end through the front of the tag, and then bring your tied end around and insert it through, and that secures the tag. So here's where we ended up. I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a reveal. Some of my favorites. I think they're all great, and I know they're going to look fantastic on my paper. Thanks so much for watching along today. And if you like this content, please consider giving me a like and subscribing. That way you'll be notified when I put out new content.